Hi there, Steve here, the British Railroader, and today we're going to be talking about weathering. The other day I posted this photograph on Instagram and Facebook and said to people that I was really pleased with how the weathering effect had turned out and that I might be tempted to do a little bit of a tutorial. Well, I've had a few people get back to me and say basically, yes please. So I thought, let's do this sooner rather than later. I'm going to take this boxcar right here and turn it into something very similar to this boxcar right here. So let's move down to the workbench and get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this apart. Not completely apart, just remove basically the bogies or the trucks, depending on which side of the Atlantic you come from. So take them off like so. And then I'm also going to remove the couplers. Now these ones have got clip-on coupler boxes. Some of them will have unscrew or screwable coupler boxes. So these ones just get a screwdriver under and they will flick off nice and easily and take the spring out. So we'll get those off and then move on to the next step, which is the bogies or the trucks. Okay, so we've taken the trucks and the couplers off of the boxcar. So we're going to start with the trucks. And the first thing I'm going to do is dry brush them. So what I've got here is some acrylic based paint, which is called Frame Dirt. This is from the Rail Match range here in the UK, but I'm sure any kind of yucky brown colour will do. Basically get a little paint on the end of your paintbrush for dry brushing and then basically wipe most of it off like so. And then what we're going to do is we're going to literally just dry brush like that. Doesn't matter if some of the black still shows through, and we're going to do around the edges and along the top. So it gives just a little coating. We're not going to do the backs because obviously that's where the bearings are for the wheel sets. We're also just going to dry brush these. Now the reason I'm doing this is because these are the bits that tend to get seen. Just pick up a little bit more paint. So you want any area that's going to get seen. And because these are acrylic based paints, they won't take that long to dry at all. So I'm going to put that one there. We'll do the other one in a moment. And then we're going to do the actual wheels. So the first thing that I'm going to do with the wheels is I'm going to take another paint. So this one, again, is by Rail Match and it's called Brake Dust. You can use whichever one you want. I like a rusty colour paint for this section because what we're going to do is just very carefully paint the faces of the wheels. Mind out for your pinpoint axle, you really don't want to get paint on that. It's not the end of the world if you do, you can quite easily remove it, but just want to do that and just do the wheel rim there. And again, it doesn't matter that this isn't blocking out completely. You've got some of the underneath colour coming through. Just try not to get it, as I have done here, on the wheel tread, but that will wipe off. And again, even if it dries, you can wipe that off fairly easily. So you want to leave that to dry and then we'll move on to the next step with the wheels. Okay, and we're now just going to finish off the wheel sets. So the face of the wheel sets, as you can see, are now dry, but they're a little bit bland. So what I want to do is just add a little layer of colour onto them. And what I'm going to use is a wash, and this is from the Games Workshop, Citadel Miniatures. It's called Null Oil. And I've been using this for quite some time, and it's an oil. It's a weird kind of stuff, but it gives a very pleasing effect. So we just brush that over. And what it does, it just darkens things down and gives it that nice kind of oily stain. and again you can leave that to dry, and that will just take away that very bright orange colour. Again, it depends on what colour you've painted the faces of your wheels. If you go for a darker colour in the first place, you probably won't need to do this, but this is just how I've always done it. So we'll paint all of those, and again let them dry, and they'll be ready to pop back into the trucks once we've finished those. Okay, so now that the dry brushing on the bogies is dry, I just want to add just a little bit more to that. And what I'm going to do is, I'll get this tissue because I will need that. So I'm going to use some weathering powders. So this is from DCC Concepts, and this is brake dust. And I just want something just to highlight. So you just get a little bit on your brush. Okay. And just pop it over like so. Do the same on the other side. Get a bit more of that on there. And the great thing about weathering powders is if you think you've done too much, you can normally brush it off. So that's looking okay. That just makes everything pop out just that little bit more. And we'll do the same with the other one. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to work on the main body of the model, and what I've done is I've taken this time some enamel paint. Now you can do this with acrylic paints, I just happen to prefer to use enamel paints, and again I'm using Rail Match and it's frame dirt, but again any kind of muddy colour, and I've mixed it with some enamel thinners, and it's kind of a 50-50 mix. In fact, it's probably 60% thinners to 50% paint. And then what I'm going to do is just very liberally wash it over the model. Just willy-nilly. Perhaps just take out some of the big areas of build-up. You want some build-up. Like so. And the good thing about this method is that you can, if you think you've done a little too much somewhere, you can take paint off. Always have a tissue handy, so you can just take the excess off of your brush. Again, your brush will just draw it. Now, this will be streaky, which is good because dirt tends to sit in streaks. And I tend to work downwards if I can. So you want to do that to the whole of the body, and we'll do that off camera. Okay, now I'm going to turn to the body. So the body was, as you know, washed with a thin wash of paint, and it's almost dry but not quite, and that's quite important. Even though this will work once the paint has dried, it actually works just that little bit better while there is still a bit of moisture on here. So I'm going to start on this side, and I've got several colours here. We've got a dark brown, we've got what's called rich old rust, and we've got a little bit of deep black. So I'm going to start just with the dark brown, put some on my brush, and again using my trusty tissue, just not too much, and then streak this down. Just mess it around, get it into those nooks and crannies where you want it. You'll have some areas that you'll want more on, some that you'll want less on, and just play with it. And again, the great thing about weathering powders is you can use as much or as little as you want. I am using a lot. I do have box cars and other wagons that are quite clean, but I also like them to be quite filthy, but patchily so. And that's what I'm trying to achieve here, is get that kind of rich look. I want this to look as if it has been not just around the block, but around the block and back again. Thing is about box cars is nobody ever cleans them. So, you know, they're not like coaches which will get put through a washer, or a locomotive, which, you know, people trying to keep the big assets clean. But these smaller ones, they tend to just let them get dirty. So that's the first one of that. And the great thing is you can work on this. You can work it in. You're going to have some panels that are dirtier than others, and, you know, lots of streaks. Like so. I'm going to move on to the roof, mainly because the roof is going to be a bit of a two-part thing. So I'm going to just give it just a coat of the brown. And just get that on there. Like so. This has got still a lot of fluid in the ribs, which is fine because it just means that I'm going to end up with some lovely patches, which is what I want. And if they're too patchy for you, you can just work them out with your brush. Anyway, roofs get dirty, very dirty, and it's interesting because we tend to keep things clean on model railways, but actually they need to be mucky, especially the roofs, because even if they do go through a washer, the roof is the one place that doesn't tend to get touched. Okay, so that's the first bit of that. And the reason I wanted to do that so well was because you then want to introduce a little bit of black. Because of all the places that you're going to get soot, and in modern railways, there is still a lot of soot, especially on diesel operated railways. So we're going to put just up here a nice layer of sooty black. Now you don't want it, you're not having a black roof, but you want it to highlight what's there so that people know that this railway is well used. There we go. There's the roof. So I'm going to finish this and then we'll move on to the next step. One last little thing that I do, just while everything else is drying and before we reach the final stage, or as I like to call it, the not using an airbrush but using an airbrush stage, is the couplers. So the couplers are nice and shiny and black. And one thing I will do is I always cut off the trip pins because I don't use them magnetically. That's just not how I use them. So it's entirely up to you. They work well as couplers without the trip pins, but obviously you can't then remotely uncouple them using magnets. But anyway, that aside, what I'm going to do is just use a little bit of my frame dirt paint and just get a little touch on the brush, wipe most of it off, but enough so that we can just very carefully just dry brush the couplers. Something you sometimes see is couplers that look far too new for the wagon. So just be careful with the mechanism. Don't want to clog it up with paint, which is why I'm dry brushing it. And don't do what I just did, which is ping off the spring, but that's not a problem. I've got spare springs and I'll replace that. And then you just do that. And I would also just do the same to your coupler boxes. Because when they go back on, even though they're not particularly noticeable, the rest of the underframe has been weathered. And just giving them a little dry brush, it's just going to make them fit in that little bit better. So we'll just do the other one, and of course I will replace the coupler spring. So once you're happy with your dry brushing and adding the amount of weathering powders that you want to get the effect that you want, it's now time to do the non-airbrush part, as I've called it. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to give it a coat of flat varnish. I'm doing it with an airbrush. You can do it with a rattle can. That would be absolutely fine, whatever you prefer. Just give a good even coat and then leave that to dry, and that should dry nice and hard and keep all of your weathering powders in place. As you can see, I've done exactly the same with the trucks. The only difference is I have masked off the inside bearings just to make sure they don't get clogged up with varnish. And I would give them a good several hours to dry. And the varnish I use normally dries in an hour or so, but give it plenty of time. So here we have the finished product. I'm quite happy with the way this has turned out. It is very dirty, and if we just turn this around and look at the ends, you can see that we've got quite a lot of detail on there. So after I finished my little dry brushing demonstration using the weathering powders, I did just work in a little rust colour, etc. And again on the roof, just a little bit more on there. One thing that I would say is don't rush this. I've done this in a very short period of time for demonstration purposes, and I've done this a few times before, so I kind of know what I can get away with. In an ideal world, I'd probably leave it longer to dry in between stages. So certainly when we did the initial wash, I probably only left it about half an hour. Maybe want to leave it an hour just so that it's still tacky but not quite dry before you then add your weathering powders. And again, with the varnishing, or as I like to call it, the airbrush part of the demonstration, you might want to leave the varnish to dry for a bit longer than I have. This is now just touch dry, and I've put everything together, but just to be doubly sure, you probably want to leave it about another hour. Well, there we have it. That's how I get some of my box cars looking as mucky as I do. As I probably mentioned at the beginning, this isn't the only way that you can weather items of rolling stock. You can airbrush, something that I don't do at the moment, but I am going to learn how to do it, and once I do, I'll do a demo for you. You can just do it by dry brushing. I've done that very successfully in the past. Weathering powders is something that's semi-new to me, and I quite like it, and I think you get a really good effect, especially when you're going for a big dirty build-up like these ones. So if you're new to this channel and you've liked what you've seen, please subscribe and tell your friends. We're more the merrier. We're more than welcome to see you. If you have any questions for me, please post them below and I will try and answer them for you. And I will be seeing you again probably just before Christmas, as Santa's been early to my house, and my Christmas present has been, well, sitting behind me for some time, and I'm going to do a little video about it and how it compares to other models of the same locomotive. So I'll hopefully see you in a couple of days' time. Thank you for watching, and once again please subscribe to the channel, and we'll look forward to seeing you for new videos in the coming weeks.